Welcome to the Simplify Your Life podcast. It's Coach Simona, and I'm glad you decided to tune in. Hey everyone! In today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about how to be less critical of others. And I'm going to share with you my 6-step framework on how to stop being critical of others. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Simona, certified life coach and author of the book 111 Ways to Simplify Your Life. I make weekly podcast episodes on personal development, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure to subscribe. Now, before we get into my 6 practical tips on how to be less critical of others, I want to address something very important. Comparing ourselves to others is something that's completely natural and has a lot to do with the way our conscious minds work. When we compare, we're trying to evaluate where we are in life and get valuable information about what we want to achieve. The problem begins when comparing turns into judgment and observing turns into criticism. Since there are way healthier ways to connect with people, in this episode we'll focus on how to be less critical of others. So let's get into my first tip. Become aware of your shadow self. According to one of the most prominent psychiatrists and psychoanalysts of all time, Carl Jung, the shadow self is an archetype that forms part of the unconscious mind and is composed of repressed ideas, instincts, impulses, weaknesses, desires, and fears. In other words, your shadow self is that dark part of yourself that you really don't want to admit exists or you don't want to associate yourself with. If you're used to criticizing others, that means that you need to pay close attention to the things you're criticizing them for. By becoming aware of that part of you that feels shameful, bad, or wrong, it will no longer hold its power over you. So how can you do that? Well, the first step towards shedding light on your shadow self is to ask yourself the following question. What do I gain by criticizing this person? When you realize why you're being critical in that moment, you'll get to know yourself better and catch yourself next time you're about to criticize. When you think about it, criticism is just a chain of thoughts aimed at the other person. What you need to do next is realize what part of you you're trying to suppress or deny when you're focusing all of that negative attention on the other person. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you think your friend's bag is ugly. So you think in your head, oh my god, I can't believe she bought this awful bag. It's embarrassing how bad it looks, and it completely ruins her entire outfit. Now, let's dissect this sentence. By criticizing your friend for her bag, even if you're just doing it in your head, you're actually trying to make yourself feel better. If your friend has an ugly bag that ruins her outfit, that must mean that you have better fashion sense than her, or that you know more about styling. How does that make you feel? Probably significant, powerful, knowledgeable, better than. Now let's dig deeper. What is the opposite of the feeling you're trying to evoke in yourself by criticizing her? Well, the opposite of better than is actually not good enough. So try to think about all the critical things you say to yourself in your head. In what areas do you feel like you're not good enough? Are you afraid of getting embarrassed? Or maybe sometimes obsess over your self-image? Pause this episode if you'd like and journal using these prompts. Now, my second tip on how to be less critical of others is directly linked to the first one. Become less critical of yourself. If you think you're not critical of yourself, but you only judge others, that is a clear sign that you're not aware of your inner monologue. That voice on the back of your head lurking in the background that's constantly trying to put you down. Let's call it the inner critic. I've made an entire episode on how to deal with self-criticism, so if you're interested in exploring this topic further, make sure to listen to episode 136 after this one. But for the sake of this episode, I'm going to share with you the easiest first step you can take towards becoming aware of your inner critic. I've made a free downloadable cheat sheet that will help you track the negative thoughts and limiting beliefs you use to criticize yourself on a daily basis. You can download it by clicking the first link in the description box below or visiting bit.ly/thoughttracker2. Now, what you need to do next is open the PDF and start writing some of the most repetitive negative thoughts you have, the emotions you feel as a result, and your behavior after you criticize yourself. The key here is to do it daily, so you start noticing the patterns. The more self-aware you become of your inner critic, the less judgmental you will be towards yourself. And that in turn will lead to less judgment and criticism towards others, which actually leads me to the next tip. Put yourself in their shoes. When we're being critical or judgmental of others, it often has something to do with not being able to understand their position or behavior. If you truly want to be less critical of others, you need to start asking yourself some introspective questions, such as, why are they doing what they're doing? What is their true motive? What could be the underlying reason that I don't know about or can't see? While we may often assume or speculate and rarely get to the real reason why people behave the way they do, it can be still beneficial to try to put ourselves in their shoes. If you're having a conversation with someone and you feel like criticizing them, instead of saying something offensive, lead with a question. I want to make an important note here. Don't use questions starting with why, because you're going to put them in a defensive position and they won't open up after that. Now, if you want to put yourself in their shoes, you can phrase your questions like inquisitive statements, such as, tell me more about that. What made you come to this conclusion? I would love for you to share your opinion on this. Try to gather as much information as you possibly can and give them space to tell their story. And if you want to put yourself in someone else's shoes when it comes to judging a TV character, a celebrity, or someone on the street, a good way to do that is to reframe the way you see them. For example, instead of saying, she's such a bad mother, you can say something like, I'm sure she's been through a lot, and that's affecting her relationship with her children. Try to give people the benefit of the doubt. See them as human beings, doing the best that they can at any given moment. Which actually leads me to tip number 4. Don't take it personally. This is going to be a quick but important one. Sometimes we're critical of others because we feel defensive, or we think that their behavior has something to do with us. The truth is that 9 times out of 10, what other people do has nothing to do with us, and everything to do with them. Besides, when you're criticizing someone else, no one wins. You may try to convince yourself that you're better than them for a second or two, or you may even temporarily feel a sense of power and dominance, but at the end of the day, criticism is poison. The type of poison that you try to aim at others, but end up drinking it yourself. Tip number 5 is to focus on the positive. We all have things that we dislike about ourselves or other people. But do we need to be always on the lookout for things that are wrong or negative? As with anything else in this world, what we focus on expands. If you keep focusing on the things that other people need to fix, you will keep your attention on the negative. We all have flaws and weaknesses, but we also have lots of great qualities and strengths. If you want to be less critical of others, you need to start using a different lens to look at the world. I'm not saying that you should put on your pink-toned sunglasses and fake positivity. But at the end of the day, you have one life to live. And whether or not you decide to spend your energy and time on things that are negatively impacting your life, or actually grow and evolve as a person, is entirely up to you. So here's a quick exercise to help you start seeing more positives than negatives. Next time you catch yourself judging someone, think of a positive thing you noticed about them. You can even compliment them or do something nice for them if you feel like it. For example, let's say you just criticize a stranger down the street. Look at them and try thinking of something nice instead. Focus on something you actually like. At some point, it will become second nature, and in time, you will start seeing way more positives than negatives. Tip number 6 is to think before you act. If one of your biggest problems when it comes to being critical of others is that you actually share your criticism, and maybe even get into fights with your partner, colleagues, or friends, then this tip will be especially helpful. Thinking before acting is such a powerful way to pause, reflect, and choose a better way to approach the situation. In the case of criticizing, I'm going to give you a very simple tool you can try next time you're about to blurt something judgmental. Imagine pressing the pause button. Literally. I want you to imagine that there is a big red pause button in front of you, and you're pressing it. Take a few deep breaths and think of the consequences of your actions. Here are some questions to think about. If you choose to share this critical remark with them, will that benefit you in any way? Will the other person actually listen and try to change? Or will you only put them in a defensive position? Will you get into a fight? Is there a better, more refined way to share your concerns? Can you phrase it in a less offensive way? Or maybe come back to this matter later when you feel less irritated or frustrated. Give yourself some time and space. Take a few deep breaths. If something is truly bothering you and you know that you need to share it, you will feel the same way about it a minute later. But I want you to first take some time and actually think about the consequences of your actions. If you want to learn more advanced strategies on how to think before you act and be less reactive, listen to episode 138 next. I will leave a link to it as well. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this episode helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss out on my weekly podcast episodes. I'm sending you all my love, and I'll talk to you in the next one.